Are you tired of guessing when it comes to your health? What if you had a real roadmap to optimize your body and mind? Well, in this episode, I'm sitting down with Dr. Sam Shay, a functional medicine expert who does a lot of testing and is breaking down his 10 pillars of health and how functional testing can save you time, money, and frustration. If you ever felt lost in the world of biohacking, genetic testing, and hormone panels, this episode is for you. Dr. Sam Shay is next level into biohacking, but simplifies what tests actually matter and how to use them to take control of your own health. Let's dive in. Before we start, I just want to give a couple updates on what's coming up for Over 40 Fitness Hacks. I have two big interviews I'm excited about. One is with founder of Crowd Health, a new type of health coverage I think is just great for either unemployed, self-employed, or part-time people. And this is going to be the next level of health insurance that we're going to start seeing in the next 5 years. Then I have a red light therapy expert that's going to be coming on my show. And it's something I've had on my list for a long time and know nothing about, but I just keep seeing all these other anecdotal testimonials of how red light therapy has helped so many people. And it's just such a simple routine to add to the program if you know what you're doing and know what to buy. So other than that, I always put out there my SKOOL program free to the first 100 members. Link is in my show notes. We have 21 spots left. Thank you for everyone for my podcasts and other social media channels that have been joining. It's really where I'm going to be spending my time other than podcasting, where you can ask questions, get answers, and I'm building this whole community for the over 40 people. So get on there. Let's grow old together. Let's do it right. Let's get on with the episode. So, Dr. Sam, I'd like to thank you for coming on my show. I originally saw you on another podcast guest I had on my show, Chris Burrs from My Vital C, and he did a longevity summit, which I watched like every single day of it because I didn't want to lose the information and mostly have to pay for it later. And you were like one of my top guests. So I reached out to you and I'm so glad you came on my show. And a lot of my audience, including myself, are getting more into like low-level biohacking, some longevity. There's just all these different tests and other social media gurus are throwing out all this methylated testing, genetic testing, all this stuff. It's just so confusing. And I was real impressed with like how you made it a little bit more concise and easy. And if someone wants to work with you, they can to go further. But just to give us a generic form of what we should be looking at, some simple tests maybe to start with, and then we can just go from there. But I'll let you take it away.
Sure thing. So I've created a visual for those that are watching. If you're not watching, it's fine. I'll be able to speak in a way that you'll be able to follow without the visuals. But if you do want the full experience, the visuals do help. What I want to talk about is optimizing performance and well-being through lab testing. So my criticism of the biohacking community is there's no map. It's just a bunch of shiny objects that people are chasing. And there's two maps. There's the lifestyle map, which I call the neuroharmony method, which encompasses 10 pillars of health. That's not the scope of this discussion. So if you're going to work with someone, make sure they have the two directions of well-being. One is they look from the outside in, meaning they look at your lifestyle, like sleep habits, exercise habits, eating habits, diet, toxic exposure, stress, routines, exposure to hidden infections and mold. You want to have someone looks at you from the outside in, and then you also want to have that same person look at you from the inside out, meaning they do lab testing to check the physiology markers, the genetic markers, whether it's one or more of blood tests, urine tests, saliva tests, stool tests, genetic tests, whatever it might be. So you want that outside in combined with the inside out approach to get a full picture. And then that person you're working with can then prioritize what's the most important thing you can do. And the benefits to doing testing is ultimately it saves you time and money.
Yeah.
Now, some people maybe think, wait, tests are expensive. Well, on what timeline? I mean, there's an initial upfront investment, but you end up saving so much time and money because you now know what you actually need, not based on some shiny new article or blog post or magazine cover or podcast guest that's just hawking their extra special nasal insufflated goji berry juice or
Yeah.
CoQ10 or whatever it might be.
I was going to say, how many hundreds of dollars worth of supplements that get you nowhere? You don't even know what you're doing.
Exactly. So you're much better off actually testing to see what you need than guessing and hoping it is what you need. So what I want to share with are the 5 main categories of understanding functional tests. Name the types of tests under each category. Name the major companies so that when you do start a lab testing journey, you already have a first exposure to the overall big picture of what's available and what companies to look at. So we'll start with the first category, which is hormone testing. Hormone testing is subdivided into 3 parts: adrenal testing, sex hormones, thyroid. Those are the big 3. And if you're going to get adrenals is about stress resilience. How able are you to adapt to stress? This is almost always a saliva test, and it's not a blood test because blood cortisol tests are useless unless they're checking for absolute overt pathology of too much or too little cortisol. Because if you do a blood test, it has to be fasting. And so you tell me if your cortisol or stress levels are going to be normal. If you're skipping breakfast, rushing through morning traffic to get to a doctor's office, to have someone in a white coat come charging at you with a needle, sure, your stress levels are going to be normal. Like,
Yeah. It's the same thing
but
with your blood pressure. Every time I go to the doctor's office, blood pressure's skyrocketed high just because of
yeah.
that exact process.
And then there's a better way to do blood pressure, for example, is like you sit in the same chair at least 3 times a week after you wake up and you pee. You sit in the same chair with the same machine and the same process at the same time. You do 3 measurements in a row. There's no apps that just collect it. And you don't go to the doctor to get your blood pressure taken. You go to the doctor with 3 months of data
Yeah.
in front of you and say, don't bother putting that stupid thing on me with your white coat. Here's the data. And then you can make a proper evaluation. So it's you're exactly right. You're exactly right. So the adrenal stress test with the saliva, you're just in the normal comfort of your own day, you're just putting saliva into a little tube over the normal course of your day. So you actually have a normal read on how your stress rhythm is going.
Okay.
Nova is a company that has adrenal cortex stress test. Precision Analytical is the one that does like the Dutch test. Their doctor's data has one. I really encourage the cortisol awakening response called a CAR. That's a newer thing for the adrenal test because it tests when you wake up, you have your cortisol, but then within 30 minutes, your cortisol should jump by 50 to 100% and then come back down. So that's the awakening response. That spike, that's actually the real test for your resilience because it's a micro stress test right there. So if you spike super high or you crash, that means you've got a massive dysregulation in your ability to handle stress. And there's protocols, nutritional and lifestyle, depending on what direction you go. So that's adrenal testing. Then there's hormone testing. The most popular one in functional medicine is called Dutch. Now, there are some other. It's called Dried Urine Total Comprehensive Hormone Test. That's what it stands for. It does 7 types of estrogen, testosterone, its metabolites, DHEA, its metabolites, progesterone, melatonin. And you want to have the full map of your sex hormones, not just 1 or 2 in the blood.
Yeah.
And you know if your hormones are exiting correctly, or if they're backing up incorrectly, or if you're deficient in some or excess in the others, you have a much more complete map. Then you've got thyroid. Now, thyroid, most people, because they don't know, they just go get their TSH checked and that's it. But there's at least 5 other markers to get: free T3, free T4, reverse T3, antibodies to thyroglobulin, also called anti-TG or thyroglobulin. And then there's antibodies to thyroid peroxidase, which is a Scrabble word, which is shortened to anti-TPO. And you want to get a test that has these different markers in it because you need a full approach. Just TSH alone is not terribly helpful unless it's in its extreme phases. And thyroid is the most obvious example of the difference between Western testing and functional testing. Western testing is you get your TSH and if you beg, kick, scream, and cry on the floor, maybe the doctor will take pity on you and run a free T4 on you or something.
Yeah.
At functional tests, we run all of these things. So Genova has a comprehensive thyroid, Access Medical has a thyroid panel, ZRT has its own version. It's everything but minus the TPO, I think is one other thing for thyroid. But I'm just throwing out these names, not to be able to memorize them, just so that you.
Yeah. We just want to know they exist. That's really why I wanted to talk to you too.
Absolutely. So that's the hormone testing. And then there's the next category is gut testing.
Here we go.
So we did hormones, adrenal, sex, hormones, thyroid. Now we're in gut testing and there's the comprehensive gut test. Then there's SIBO. Then there's food intolerance testing. Now, the big gut tests, there's really only a couple that functional medicine doctors actually use. There's some that are open to the public, which have dubious efficacy. So the ones that I recommend are Diagnostic Solutions Labs called the GI Map, Genova's GI Effects, Doctor's Data, GI 360. And then there's something called the CDSA, which is called the Comprehensive Digestive Stool Analysis. And a bunch of lab companies have that. And what this giant gut test is doing, it's checking for hidden infections of many different varieties: H. pylori, parasites, candida, bad bacteria, worms, viruses. It's checking for normal gut flora. It's checking for digestion markers like pancreas and gallbladder. The immune system, like, do you have gut inflammation? Do you have antibodies to gluten? Do you have, some of them run air quotes, leaky gut markers as well. This is the most important one. Then you've got SIBO testing, and then they're testing for hydrogen, methane, some newer ones called sulfur. Genova has a 3-hour SIBO test. SIBO stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And then there's TriSmart, I think it's Gemelli Tech, I believe it's the company. They have like the highest standard one that's newer on the market. They check for hydrogen, methane, and sulfur. I think it's called TrioSmart or TriSmart, something like that.
Okay.
And I would recommend people do the bigger gut test first before doing SIBO, because a lot of the SIBO can be caused by issues found in the bigger test. Then there's food intolerance testing, and there's a bunch of labs that do this, a bunch. Now,
Yeah.
I am not a huge fan of first pass food sensitivity testing. I think that's after the fact. And here's why. If this is my arm and I poke my forearm with my finger and the skin is healthy, my finger just bounces off. Fine. Now, if I have an open cut on my arm and I poke my finger in that open cut, it's going to hurt and get inflamed and be annoyed, right?
Yep.
Now, if this is my gut lining and not my forearm, and then my finger is now a piece of broccoli,
Yeah.
the skin, the internal lining of the gut is sealed and fine and healthy, the broccoli will just bounce off. But if it's infected, inflamed, damaged, stressed, toxic, whatever it might be, the piece of broccoli hits it, and now the gut creates an immune response to the broccoli. Now, my question is that if I haven't, going back to my forearm, if I have a cut on my forearm and I poke my finger in the cut, do I have a finger allergy?
No.
No, I don't have a finger allergy. I have an open wound that's being attacked physically.
And that was just the first thing that came in.
Yeah. So I would say first do the big gut test, heal, seal, and soothe the gut. Then you can run food sensitivity tests.
I'll tell you right now, Dr. Sam, that's so funny because I've had environmental allergies, whatever. I mean, all of them, but food allergies, I didn't start getting them until my 30s. And they were all kind of the stuff I was abusing in my 20s, my party days and all that kind of stuff. And staying away from beef, shrimp, milk protein was the biggest one I got anaphylaxis off of. And every doctor I got, we just do the blood test, they see the IgEs and, oh, there it is. Yeah, those are the things you got to watch out for. And then years later, my direct primary care doctor recommends doing one of these gut health tests through Diagnostic Solutions. And we do it and I finish it and the supplements I recommended healed my gut. Then I still went to my primary care health insurance to go do the back prick test because I'm like, let me just see. Everyone says the back prick test is better than the food intolerances. So I go do that. Literally, they said, yes, you have every environmental allergy known to man. We know that. And for food intolerances, you are not allergic to anything. I'm like, how the hell can that be? If you guys for all these years doing the blood test told me I was, and now you do this one and now I'm not. And it makes sense because I literally healed my gut first before I did that back prick test.
Yeah. Yeah, so you didn't have a finger allergy.
Yeah, I didn't have the finger allergy anymore.
Yeah, you just had an irritated gut lining that was just reacting the only way it could to having physical food just grazing it. So the problem with food sensitivity testing is they're really expensive in aggregate. And I'd rather you spend the money on these other tests first. And it's a very high risk, moderate to low reward because you either come back with you're reactive to everything, which is not helpful. You're just reduced to eating like chicken and celery for the rest of your life, if that's how you misinterpret the test or the clinician does. Or you come back and it says you're reactive to nothing from an immunoglobulin standpoint, but you're definitely symptomatically reactive. So it's like, what's the point?
Either way, it's just stay away from the food. And that's what my doctor said. I believe you that you were having some kind of reaction to this food, so just don't eat it. Oh, great. I just spent all this money on this back prick test for no reason.
Well, so the value in doing the food sensitivity testing, particularly if you do the big gut test first, is that now you do know what stuff you really should stay away from. And then if you did it in the wrong order, like the food sensitivities first, you're still reacting to the foods. So you may just want to temporarily reduce those foods at the moment while you heal your gut.
Yeah.
And so you're not just further inflaming the gut. And if you do need food sensitivity testing, Cyrex Labs, Vibrant America, Alcat, Genova, I mean, even Diagnostic Solution Labs now has food intolerance testing. So it's there. And we lingered on this one because it's such a field testing and that I would rather people put their resources on the big gut test first.
I agree.
Then we've got mitochondria, brain, liver, and I would also add like just generic blood tests here. So the mitochondria testing is not a lot of functional medicine practitioners do this because mitochondria testing is very complicated. The jargon is you can win a Scrabble tournament, learn being on a first name basis with these metabolites on this test. A level of complexity of going from reading an adrenal and a gut test up to a mitochondria test is the same complexity jump as going from studying skeletal anatomy to neuroanatomy. Now, I used to be a functional neurologist before I switched 100% to virtual. You can't do neurology over Zoom.
Yeah.
I had a physical practice where I did functional neurology, but the level of anatomy, the jump from just musculoskeletal anatomy to neuroanatomy is massive. And it's the same type of jump to get to understand mitochondria in detail. I mean, I studied with Dr. Kalish for 4 years to learn how to interpret and teach on the mitochondria test. So the importance of the mitochondria is that it's the electricity factory of the body. 10% of your body weight are mitochondria. So imagine a city where 10% of its footprint was the electrical grid. And the mitochondria, if you take the analogy of a factory, it actually goes really well. So a factory has walls. These are specialized fatty acids called sphingolipids. A factory has machinery. These are called vitamins. The machinery requires computer chips. These are called minerals. The factory has a conveyor belt that's called CoQ10. The factory has janitors to put out sparks that fly off the machineries. That's called antioxidants, or rather the antioxidant enzymes like MNSAD. I mean, I don't want to go into that level of detail, but you've got janitors that run around. You've got raw materials that have to be delivered to the factory. In this case, oxygen, amino acids, fatty acids, and carbs. Oxygen is then delivered via the red blood cells, which require iron and all the amino acids to make a red blood cell, and proper breathing and everything that goes into have a healthy red blood cell. And then to deliver the other raw materials, amino acids, fats, and carbs, each of them require a different truckers union to haul in the goods. Now, the truckers union are all paid in different currencies. So the fatty acid truckers union likes B2, carnitine, glycine, and magnesium. So if you don't have all the things, the truckers go on strike and the stuff sits on the docks. So this is what people in the biohacking call the carnitine shuttle. And so if you're lacking those nutrients, your factory doesn't get 1/3 of its fuel source because the union's on strike. The amino acid truckers union is paid mostly in B6. The carb truckers union is paid in a bunch of B vitamins, chromium, lipoic acid, a couple of other things. So this is where your nutrients also come in, not even for the factory, but just delivering the goods. The other thing with factories is you need security system, because you got vandals who are going to either break stuff for fun or take over the factory. And these are called viruses. These are called infections. You also have to have a waste removal system because you got to get rid of toxins. And the vandals can also bring in sludgy stuff. They're not just toilet paper in your factory. They're like dumping toxic stuff in your area. So you need to have your detox systems up and running. And the analogy goes on. I think I've made my point.
Yeah.
So the mitochondria require in excess of 50 separate nutrients in total to work properly. And doing comprehensive mitochondria testing is really critical for optimal health, because it's the areas of the body that require the most mitochondrial density are kidneys, heart, eyes, frontal lobes, the important stuff. So there's a couple companies that do this. So Genova has the ion profile. Not every functional practitioner is allowed to run it. They had to be grandfathered in to be able to run it. That was the original test. I'm one of them. Then there's other competing ones called the Metabolomics, also by Genova or Nutraval. Diagnostic Solutions Lab, the same people that do the GI map, they have something called the Omex. Now, it's just like the core mitochondrial urine test plus the blood-based amino acids, whereas the ion panel is the core mitochondrial function test plus amino acids plus fatty acids plus fat-soluble vitamins plus key minerals, inflammatory markers plus some key heavy metals. So the way to understand a mitochondria test is you've got a urine portion and a blood portion. The blood portion is fuel, and I'm switching analogies here to a car. Blood is what fuel is in the tank. The urine test is the emissions test that what went through the engine.
Yeah.
That's why it's both. So you can test a lot about the health of the car by the emissions test, and you know about the quality of what's going into the engine by what's looking in the fuel. That's why you have this mixture of blood and urine.
Yeah. I always thought like a mitochondria test would need like a biopsy to really get it, but I guess
no, that's not possible. You cannot biopsy a mitochondria. You can't stick a needle in something you've got thousands and thousands and thousands of mitochondria in each cell.
Yeah,
we don't have it that small.
Yeah.
You can see a mitochondria on an electron microscope, which is like, oh God, what is it, like 10 to the negative ninth of a mitochondria? It's really small. So because it's 10% of your body weight, the emissions from that is enormous.
Okay.
So that's how you can measure it reliably in the urine, is because it's 10% of your body weight, bro. Like you can splice and dice stuff out of the urine from that.
Yeah.
Quite readily.
Okay.
And then I'll put other blood tests in here as well, like blood sugars, your basic CBC and CMPs and all the stuff that checks the quality of your blood. I would lump in with the mitochondria testing. So we've done hormone testing, gut testing, mitochondria, brain, liver, and general blood testing. Then we come to the weird stuff: molds, metals, and Lyme. Molds, metals, Lyme, and you can put environmental toxins in here as well. So this is stuff you don't want. You don't want this. So there's several different mold tests out there. There's provoked urine tests. Now, there's big debates in the functional medicine community about what's best. Is it a blood test? Is it a provoked urine test? Is it this? Is it that? The most important thing around mold is find the source and get away from it and remediate it or get out. But mold really screws people up. I'm in the process, literally as we speak right now, of breaking my lease to leave my apartment because I did a massive mold, endotoxin, and actinomyces test in my apartment. And it is riddled with mold and actinobacteria and endotoxins. And it explains a lot of why my health has been so weird.
Yeah.
And I have mold poisoning.
Yeah. I literally just had a podcast guest where for like 6 years, her whole health and wellness just going down the tube. And going to all these different doctors, functional doctors. She had to get like 7 different opinions, and finally one discovered all this brain and depression and suicidal thoughts that she was having, and her overall health deteriorating came from mold. Quick fix, detoxed it, done. And now she's like a biohacker now. So I'm like, oh
Totally.
my God.
Yeah.
And that was from one exposure in her house while painting. So I guess the fumes from the paint acted as a transmission to get it in. So
It's not a transmission. It's what it is. It's opportunistic. So mold, Lyme, and other infections take advantage of a weakened system because mold is a fungus and fungus grows on dead things.
yeah.
I mean, they made an entire show like The Last of Us based on a synopsis that went rogue. So mold is there to eat you. And if you are weaker, it will eat you. And that's what happens. So you see, if people have mold, they usually have metals and environmental toxins also. And usually Lyme gets activated eventually because Lyme is also opportunistic. So there's different mold tests out there. Great Plains, Vibrant Wellness has theirs. There's other companies that have it too. Metals and environmental toxins, Quicksilver Scientific, they have probably the best mercury test out there because it checks for blood, urine, and hair, which looks at different types of mercury and different like exposures and whatnot. There's also Vibrant Wellness has environmental toxins. They have a urinary heavy metal test. There's urine toxic metals by Doctors Data. There's many Access Medical has a urine metals. Now, some people recommend you do what's called a provoked test, meaning you take stuff that provokes the detox process. So you pull metals and toxins out of your tissues into the blood because they're mobilized by detox. And that's a more quote accurate read than just simply checking what's just ambiently there. That's debate. Then there's Lyme. So Vibrant Wellness has tick-bornes. IGeneX has lots of different Lyme panels. IGeneX is a really high investment. And like they're probably one of the most expensive labs I've seen. And my opinion is that Lyme is almost always opportunistic. I would rather put the funds on adrenal, thyroid, chondria, mold, and metal before investing in an IGeneX panel when the things are likely the reason Lyme is activated in the first place. So this is the bad stuff. So we covered the 4 of the 5 categories: hormones, gut, mitochondria, and the weird stuff.
Bad stuff. Yep.
Bad stuff. And then we got genetics. So genetics is an entire field.
Oh yeah.
I'm a specialist in genetics. This is something I'm deeply passionate about. Genetics is different from functional testing, but related. So functional tests, what we mentioned before, gut, hormone, mitochondria, the weird stuff, those tests are a thumbprint of what is happening now or in the recent history of you right now. That is telling you what is happening now or in the recent history. Genetics does not tell you what is happening now. Genetics tells you what is your optimal way of living and what are the fault lines that you are vulnerable to given enough time and unaligned lifestyle, whether you actively chose it or it was the poor lifestyle where you're a victim of circumstance. So a genetics test will not tell you what your thyroid levels are. It will not tell you how your gut health is. It will not tell you what amino acids you're low in, but it will tell you what's your ideal diet. Are you keto, paleo, Mediterranean, or high carb? It will tell you what are some hardwired trigger foods genetically, not based on if you've got a raw intestinal line. It will tell you what is your relationship to absorbing vitamin D, which is critical. Vitamin D is arguably the most important nutrient in the body next to like water. And it will tell you, are you a hyperinflamer? Do you have genetically higher risk for poor detox pathways? What is your optimal form of exercise in terms of performance? How are you on recovery of exercise? Where are you in terms of your ability for VO2 max, your genetic capacity? Where are you in terms of mood genes? Like I run a methylation panel that has 12 genes, not 5 that Gary Brecka claims is the only 5 you need.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to mention is like, this is the only one of everything you're talking about that's being thrown out in social media world right now is the methylated folate and all that kind of stuff. But there's so much more.
I got so angry when I heard Gary Brecka's Rogan interview. This is back in December of, I believe, 23. Now, Gary Brecka is a brilliant educator. He's got very good analogies. He has a very unique perspective as kind of an actuarial medical reader of looking at all these profiles. So I respect the lens he comes from. I completely disagree with some of his conclusions.
Yeah.
And I was so upset. I did what normal people do. I just dove into the research and recorded 3 separate podcasts showing my work on how his conclusions are wrong. And basically, the thing that people don't teach you about genetics is the following. Number 1, there's a hierarchy of genes. Methylation is downstream from inflammation as one example.
Yeah.
So if I were to pick between working on methylation genes and helping improve the expression of inflammatory genes, I would pick the inflammatory genes 100% of the time. 100% of the time.
Yeah.
So when you're running genetics, there's a couple pitfalls that people fall into. Number 1, they test so many genes and the reports that are given give no prioritization and no organization. Here's all your results. Here's all the things you need to do. Here's all the supplements you need to buy. And you need to do all of them. They're all equally important. Good luck. And it leads to overwhelm, frustration, confusion, and ultimately, again, we're going to throw out some scrub words. It leads to some fatalistic nihilism, or like, what's the point? I'm probably going to die Tuesday based on my
Yeah.
comp result gene test. So you need to do a gene test in which you're presented a prioritized and organized set of recommendations where you can know, I'm going to start here and work on these 5 things first. And there's the next 5 things, and then there's the next 5 things. Because like I said, like inflammation is at the top of the pile. Work on that first. Then you can get all granular the further down you go,
Yeah.
if you want.
Well, that method works better with people's budgets anyways, too.
Totally. So the other thing you need to know about genetics is that there's different types of genetics testing. Most people are aware of what's called genetic variations, like, are you a red, yellow, or a green dot? And this is like, do you have the good version, the bad version, the version that's somewhere in between? But there's another type of testing that is hardly anyone knows about, much less can discuss, much less apply to people individually. And that's called copy number analysis. That's a unique test that I do along with the other types of tests we check for green, yellow, or red. And it's looking at what is the number of duplicates of a specific gene that helps you determine your diet. So if people are wondering, like, what's my ideal diet? I hear people do keto, people do Mediterranean, some people are high carbers, whatever. I mean, I had a client of mine who was keto shamed. He was basically just an amateur tennis athlete. And when all his friends keto shamed him, and so he started doing keto, he started fainting on the court. And then he ran this test, and he's a high carb person. He's not a keto because it's just it's completely wrong for his genetics going keto. So the way to understand this is that imagine your digestion is a fort, and carbs are charging the fort like it's the medieval, like the Vikings are charging the gates. Now, those Vikings are the carbohydrates, and you've got like cannons lining the fort, and your cannons have a specific firing rate. Now, the variation, meaning green, yellow, red, is what type of cannon is it? Is it a green cannon, a yellow cannon, or a red cannon? Now, in this particular gene, it's called AMY1 gene that makes amylase. Amylase breaks down carbohydrates in the saliva.
Mm-hmm.
The difference in the versions isn't much. I'm just going to throw out an easy number. So like the red version throws out like 90 cannonballs an hour. Their yellow is 95 and the green is 100. So there's not much difference between them. But there's a huge difference if you have 1 cannon versus 10. I'd rather have 10 red cannons than 1 green cannon.
Yeah.
So this is what I'm talking about. It's the duplicates. It's the number of duplicates of the gene that matter. It's not the version of the gene. It's the number of cannons, not the version of the cannon. So if I have fewer cannons, I can only tolerate fewer carbs. If I have lots of cannons, I can have lots of carbs. I have the second lowest carb tolerance you can have. I have a 2.
Oh, wow.
I have only 2 copies, just 2. I am low carb paleo. The people have 1, I say, sorry, you're keto. Good luck. Like, not that callous about it. But it's like, I'm a low carb paleo person. So I'm the second lowest carb tolerance you can have. Now, I'm over 40. And I had gotten this test back when I was 35, 36, and I would have done anything to have known this 20 years earlier.
Yeah.
Because like I was having a perfect Portlandia Mediterranean diet where I knew the names of my farmers and their chickens. And I was having lots of digestive problems, energy swings up and down, mood swings. And I just didn't understand it because my diet was so good. And I realized it wasn't a carb quality issue, it was a carb quantity issue. And within 1 week of changing my diet to my appropriate genetic-based carb tolerance, my digestive issues resolved and my energy levels and mood levels leveled out significantly. So this is a critical test. And it's at the moment, the only person who's doing it, as far as I know, is me.
Yeah.
In this. And the reason why is because the lab is outside of the country and we're trying to find a lab inside the country that will do it. And we haven't been successful. But we found a lab that will run all the variations for us. And then we'll bundle all these carb tolerance tests and ship it off to the lab in Australia to be analyzed. And then I just get API'd the results and analyze it.
Yeah.
So it is a very rare, super helpful test. And you can't get this from a 23andMe or an Ancestry or anything because it's not looking at the version of the canon. It's looking at the number of duplicates. And 23andMe and Ancestry don't do duplicate analysis. They only do the variation analysis. That's why it's a separate cheek swab.
Yeah.
If you compare it to there's 2 swabs in the kit, one for this and then one for everything else.
Okay. I wonder how close this will be to, like, my style has always been trial and error. Try all the diets, see what works for you. And for me, keto, paleo, some version of low carb, I just feel the greatest, all that. But I'm wondering once I take the test, it's going to tell me to start taking more carbs in.
Well, here's the thing is that trying all the diets may never work for very specific reasons for some people. And it's something I call metabolic barbed wire. This is a term I've come up with. And metabolic barbed wire is the following. I'll give you an example. Someone is a high carb person genetically, but they have a candida infection. eat high carbs, it's going to match with their genetics, but it's going to make the candida bloom. They're going to feel terrible no matter what. They do
Yeah.
low carbs, it doesn't jive with their genetics. They do high carbs, it makes the candida worse. On the flip side, if you're a low carb person like me, but if I have a problem with the digestion, absorption, utilization of fat, say I have a problem with my gallbladder, my pancreatic enzymes, my ability to absorb fats through the intestines, my carnitine shuttle, that truckers union isn't paid properly to bring it to the mitochondria to burn the fat, or the mitochondria themselves are damaged and can't burn the fat even if it's delivered, then I can have a higher fat diet, but I still can't use it because I got this metabolic barbed wire of a problem somewhere in the chain that's blocking me using it. So no matter what diet I do, I feel terrible. And that's where functional medicine is super helpful, because you use the functional tests, you do the gut test, the mitochondria test, these other tests to figure out where's the metabolic barbed wire that's preventing me from accessing my genetic ideal. So the one way to know for sure, I mean, there's never 100%, but like one way to pretty much guarantee someone is having metabolic barbed wires, you hear this phrase: I've tried every diet, it doesn't work.
There's something wrong with you.
The other giveaway is that you run the genetics testing and you implement all the recommendations judiciously for 2, 3, 4 months, and you are not improving. Okay. One, the genetics didn't lie. It means that there's metabolic barbed wire wrapping around your genetics that you can't access the benefit. It doesn't mean you wasted money on the genetics. The genetics is never going away. You just got to pause, go see a functional practitioner, use lab testing to find out what's the nature of the barbed wire, defang it with a different diet, protocols, recommendations, lifestyle. Then once you remove all the barbed wire, then you go back to the genetics that you had, and you never wasted your money. It's just to overcome some barbed wire first. So that's why, like, I love the genetics, because you never waste your money. You just may find out you've got a block in you. So that's what I'm talking about. Like, experimenting with diets doesn't always work, because sometimes no matter what you do, you're not going to feel well simply because you got these conflicting mechanisms.
Yeah. It seems the lucky ones that make it through end up being fitness influencers promoting their way made it. And that's not the same for everybody else.
That's actually how I came up with my 10 pillars of health, which is the outside in, as we mentioned earlier. Like, how do you analyze lifestyle? It's called magic bulletism. So magic bulletism is, it's all the same story. It's the same narrative. And I suffered from this and this, and then I tried this and this and it didn't work. Then I found the thing.
Yeah.
And helped me with all the other stuff that all these other things didn't work. And I wasted so much time and energy and money. And this thing is the thing. And by the way, they, capital T, they don't want you to know about the thing.
Yeah, of course. That's the perfect title, but
they want to stop you from achieving because they don't want you to know about this. But if I am here lighting the torch, sharing this wisdom with you, lighting the way, and you can buy my thing, do my MLM downline if you just sign up right now.
There we go.
It's the same narrative. Now, here's what happened. I know what chronic illness is. I had chronic illnesses for a long time. That's why it's called chronic. And I was so frustrated by watching people try this magic bullet, this supplement, this diet shift, this exercise thing, this meditation technique, this detox program, and they would genuinely get better, but I wouldn't.
No.
And then I get gaslit saying, oh, you're either super stressed out or you're self-sabotaging, or you know what, you just need to buy more stuff, more of the thing, do it more, harder, longer, and get other people involved, because you're clearly not committed enough, or you're just like super toxic on all levels.
Yeah.
So it's this kind of nutritional / spiritual gaslighting that happens. And what I realized is that they're partly correct, because when I started my physical practice back in 2010, and I worked with chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, autoimmune, digestive hormone imbalance, people, all in the same person, by the way, and I came up with my 10-pillar model, I found that the people who struggled with chronic illness had a minimum 7 out of 10 pillars crumbling. Didn't matter which 7, minimum 7.
That's a lot.
And if you go to any practitioner or do a protocol or do a product suite, they're going to help at most 1 to 3 pillars really well. Like most clinicians, if they're honest, are really good at 1 to 3 pillars. But if you've got 7 pillars crumbling and you only tend to 1 to 3 at a time, it's like sitting on 7 tacks, removing 3 and being gaslit that you're not 100% healthy. Because we remove these 3, why aren't you better? Why are you still complaining? Clearly, it's all in your head. You're technically healthier by having 3 less tacks, but you're still being poked in 4 separate ways. And so the magic bulletism was explained because the people who solved all their problems by snorting goji berry juice, they just had 1 pillar that had a giant goji berry juice hole in it that they snorted, and it built that pillar, and then suddenly they feel great. But the reality is that if you've got 7 pillars crumbling, you need to have multiple magic bullets all synergistically working together over time to rebuild the pillars to sufficiently feel better, of which snorting goji berry juice may be one of them.
Maybe on pillar number 3.
Yeah. Make it 11th pillar just for snorting goji berry juice, whatever. So the 10 pillar model explained why magic bulletism worked for the people that it worked for and why it epically failed for people like me, but also how to now use the magic bullets correctly in context as long as you have, going right back to the beginning of our discussion, practitioner who knows how to look at you from the outside in and knows how to analyze the labs from the inside out. And this way you can actually correctly pick the right air quotes magic bullets in combination with each other that's unique to you.
Yeah.
So I hope that was helpful for our listeners and viewers because some of these tools are amazing. They can just be misapplied. That's all.
Yeah. Some of the stuff I already went through, I got a magic bullet with my gut microbiome test, but I healed a lot of stuff that I didn't even know what was wrong with me. But I'm not also going through all those other testing. What's the point of doing something like that if you just let it all go again and all your other pillars are crumbling? So that's why I've gravitated towards you too. And people with like all these new age testing. I mean, I hate wasting my time and spending money when I could just, let's do it right. Let's get the foundation, go to the next one. And before we go into your program, Dr. Sam, just in my head, that gut microbiome test, if people want to do this on their own, do the biome test, do the genetic testing just to see where you're at, and then what type of diet. But still, you've got all these holes. What would you recommend? And then what is it like working with you?
So if people were wanting someplace to start, the highest value per dollar over time, without even a close second, is the genetics.
Okay. That's
Because
what
you run the
like,
genetics once and you amortize, and the results don't change. The recommendations don't change because your
got your
genes don't.
rock.
Yeah. And so you just amortize whatever you invest over 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and it's basically negligible what the investment is for what you get out of it. So I would start with the genetics, and people can go to my website, drsamshay.com, and you can learn about the genetics there. Like I have an entire program that's really easy for people to plug into to just get their genetics. And I built an entire library of understanding all the gene clusters. There's a 12-week implementation program. There's even an option for group coaching. If people want to ask questions directly, there's a group coaching option. So I would say start with the genetics. And then if people want to look at functional testing, they can also go to my website and there's an option to schedule a discovery call. And not everyone needs to start with a gut test. Asterisk, it's usually over 50% of the people that need to start with a gut test.
Yeah.
I mean, I would call it like a Pareto's principle of a Pareto's principle. So like 80% of the issues, 80% of the time can be tied to something in the gut. So that's like, if you do the calculation, it's 64%, just in easy 80% of 80% is 64. So it's, if you want a generic place, it'd be genetics, then gut. But not everyone needs to start with gut. I mean, this is where functional medicine is so helpful, is because you can work with an individual practitioner. And if you work with an individual practitioner, make sure they have a system to analyze you from the outside in and a suite of labs to analyze you from the inside out. I have the 10 pillars of health, camped under what's called the neuroharmony method, which is the updated mind-body method, where lab testing is that bridge between mind and body. I have 10 pillars of health. Other people have like the triangle of health. Other people have like the inverted hypotenuse, the magical rhombus of wellness. I don't care.
Yeah.
Have a model that can help you analyze your lifestyle and have a suite of labs that can be customized to your specific needs. So that's how I would recommend people choose a functional practitioner they want to work with, is do they have frameworks? Do they have a suite of labs? And start there.
Yeah. No, and then even for myself, just the amount of supplements that I've collected over times that I'm biohacking myself and everything, just to stop that, I'd probably save about $200-300 right there that I can invest in some testing first, and no problem bringing some of those back in if those tests correlated to needing that.
do.
So I think that's a better approach. So
It is. Some testing is certainly more than $200-300 if you include the analysis. Getting the test is one thing. Getting it properly analyzed is another.
Yeah.
And so there's the investment of the test, there's the analysis, and then there's the report of findings, which is describing what's going on and how you then integrate all of those tests with each other. So it's one thing to analyze a gut test alone. It's completely different ballgame if you're looking at gut plus hormone plus toxins plus mitochondria plus genetics all at the same time. That's a very different skill set. So, and mold and toxins and all this other stuff. Some practitioners are more I focus on just these few tests. Others, like myself, we've cross-trained in a bunch, and we're known for, we can look at all of them simultaneously and be able to put together a judicious plan. And if people want to, whether it's because they don't want to avoid overwhelm or they just have a limited investment and they just want to get started on one thing, then the initial consult will tell you what's the highest priority lab to focus on first, and you can put things on later. So I guess the only other thing I would say in regards to working with the functional practitioners, make sure that there is a system for implementation support.
Yeah.
Like, and a lot of practitioners use like health coaches. Like the principal practitioner will do all the analysis and figure out what to do. And like, here's the diet, here's the lifestyle, here's the nutrients. But you don't really need the principal person to tell you how to cook an antihistamine bone broth.
Yeah.
The health can do that,
Exactly.
So don't be surprised if you work with a principal practitioner who does all the heavy lifting from the analytics side, but then you have a health coach that supports you in the implementation.
Yeah. Well, it's just called a good business and having different levels and support systems. So,
Right.
cool. Well, Dr. Sam, a lot to digest there, and I'm probably going to have to rewatch this a couple times too. But it's definitely stuff I'm trying to get into with the higher level biohacking. And thank you so much for putting it a little bit more into simplistic terms, because I've watched some of your other podcasts, and I know you can get to that level if someone wants to go into that detail. But appreciate what you're doing, and just my audience knows I'll put all your website links and everything to check you out, and some of those testing names and companies at least to start out with.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for doing podcasting. I mean, I genuinely mean that because it's people like you that help educate people at large with what's available out in the field. And so now it empowers individuals to have much more agency and control over their personal health and their direction in life and just be much more in control of how their life turns out. And I couldn't do this with people like you helping educate people at large. And I'm really grateful for you and all the other podcasters and summits that I've been on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And for me, it's just getting the message out there. It's what we can do now, we couldn't do 10, 15 years ago. So this is just insane. So hopefully it resonates with someone out there.